Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So one of the common questions I get is how I edit my photos. So I thought I would walk you through how I take and edit my photos. So this is a before picture and you can see it's kind of dark, the colors aren't as bright, the paper and the planner isn't quite as white as it is in person. So this was taken in natural daylight without any studio lights, and then this photo is what it looks like after I am done editing. So the colors are more colorful, the planner pages is more white, there's less of that yellow tone in the overall photo. So I'm going to walk you through step by step with the apps that I use for all of my editing. And I take my photos on my iPhone and then I edit with a couple different apps. So I'm going to walk you through editing with natural daylight and then with studio lights, since I also have those. So we're going to do the natural daylight one first. So I've opened up my Photos app on my phone, and this is the original photo that you just saw that was taken in natural daylight. And then this one right here is taken with my studio lights. It's the exact same photo. So if I slide these so you can see them both, they're pretty close to the same starting point. The one on the right with the studio lights might be a little bit less yellow than the one with the natural daylight. So the first app I like to use is VSCO or VSCO. I'm not quite sure which one it is. So I only do a couple different edits in here. So I basically use about the same number range for each of my edits. So first I do the contrast. And I usually play with this to see what I like between 1.5 and 2.5. So I'm going to settle on 1.8 for this photo. Next up, I change the sharpen feature just a little bit. So this goes all the way up to 12, but I find that the camera that I have in my iPhone, I don't have to sharpen the image as much. So I usually stick in between 2.5 and 3 for this. So I'm going to do 2.7 for this photo in particular. The third thing I do in this app is up the saturation just a little bit, and I pretty much either choose 0.4 or 0.5. It's not much, but I find that it just adds a little bit of a pop of color. And then next up, the last thing I do in this app is white balance, and I really only change the temperature. So I change this based on whether or not my photo is more yellow or blue. So starting in the neutral, there's a little bit more of the yellow tones. So I'm going to go ahead and bump the temperature down a little bit to 1.2. And that just makes everything a little bit more clearer and brighter and less yellow toned. And I find this really helps because when I go to lighten the photo, I feel like it lightens it more evenly if it has a pretty neutral blue and yellow tone. So that's everything I do in that app. And then the second one that I use is Facetune. So I'm going to open the photo that I just saved here. And I really only do a couple things. So I scroll all the way over to filters. And instead of whitening the background, which I used to do, I just use the lighting and then the lighter filter. And this just brightens everything on the photo, which I love this way more than the whitening tool. So you can see it's brighter, and then I usually save the changes and then do it a second time just to see what changes in the photo. And instead of leaving this at the default of 50, I brought it down to the setting of 38, so it's not as bright. So I kind of like the look of that. So there's a little bit of a before and after when you tap on the original photo button. So that's everything that I do in Facetune. I really just use it for that lightening filter. And then I'll do any final edits that I want to do in the actual Instagram photo editing app. So if I feel like the photo needs to be just a little bit brighter, I'll bump up the brightness in this app. But I usually don't do it a whole lot. I usually keep it between 5 and 10. So I'm going to go with 10 on this one, and it really doesn't change it a whole lot. It just makes the white on the pages just a little bit more brighter. So this is the final photo, and this is what I have posted to my Instagram. So that is how I edit using natural daylight. And next up, I'm going to walk you through the exact same steps with my studio lights. Which, if you want to see my photo setup and how I take my photos, I have a blog post right up for that. So I will have that linked in the description box if you're curious about that. So for the studio lights, you saw earlier that there wasn't a whole lot of a difference between the natural daylight and the studio lights. This one is just a little bit less of yellow tone, so I won't have to use the temperature function too much for this one. So I do basically the same thing for every single photo, and I have it pretty much down to where I can edit a photo in like 30 seconds to a minute. So I'm going to go back into edit, and I'm going to do contrast, and I always do it in this same order. So I'm going to pick the same level of contrast, 1.8. And then I'm going to do a little bit of sharpening. So I'm going to leave that at 2.8 for this one. Next up, I'm going to increase the saturation just a tiny bit to 0.5. And then lastly, I'm going to do white balance, and I'm going to bump the temperature down because there is just a slight yellow tone, not really anything too bad. So I'm going to put this at 0.9. So you can see when you go too far. So if I bump it up above 2, the entire photo gets a little bit more of a blue cast to it. So I'm going to bump this back down. So that is everything that I do in this app. So now I'm just going to save this to my camera roll and go back to Facetune. And I'm going to use the exact same filter. So I'm going to go into the filters option, and then I'm going to select the lightening category, and then I use the lighter one, which is the second one in from the left. So you can see that really brightens the photo. I just love this filter so much. So I'm going to go back in and do it a second time and bump it down to 31. So I'm actually going to go ahead and increase one more time so you can see. You can really tell like when you lighten something a little bit too much, the color gets kind of washed out and it's just too bright. So I'm going to bump this up, as you can see. So I'm going to bump this up and you can kind of see how everything just gets a little bit more washed out. So I'm going to cancel that one, and I really like how it looks with that level of filter. So I'm going to go ahead and save this to my camera roll just like I did with the first photo. And to post this on Instagram, I would do exactly the same thing. So I would just do the brightness edit just a little bit, like maybe up to 10. And then if I needed to, I will also mess around with the saturation in this. If I feel like after I made all those edits, the colors were a little bit too bright, I might bring the saturation down in the Instagram app just a little bit. So that is the photo that I would post to my Instagram page for that one. As you can see, they turned out very similar, which is super nice. I am a big fan of just shooting in natural lighting if you can't or don't have studio lights. It is totally possible to get a beautiful photo for your Instagram. And like I said earlier, I have all of my photo tips and setup photos in my blog post, which I will have linked in the description box. So I hope you found that helpful in how I edit my Instagram photos. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video, and leave me a comment if you have any questions. I will do my best to help you out. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of my videos, and I will talk to you all in my next one. Bye guys!